As the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza rages on, 2023 ends as one of the deadliest in the history of this conflict, with the situation deteriorating on nearly all fronts. Since the end of the written reporting period, hostilities have continued inside Gaza as Israeli forces advances further into Khan Yunis in the southern part of the Strip, and intensified operation in reported Hamas strongholds in the north, in Jabalia refugee camp and in Shushaiyeh neighborhood, as well as in Kamal Alwan hospital. Intensive Israeli airstrikes continue across the Strip. Over 1,000 more fatalities, overwhelmingly Palestinians, have taken place. The toll on civilians, including women and children, remains unbearable. With more than 100 Israeli hostages still held by Hamas, the Israeli army announced it had retrieved the bodies of 3 hostages, 2 from tunnels in Jabalia refugee camp and 1 woman. On 15 December, the IDF said that Israeli soldiers has mistakenly shot and killed 3 hostages in Shushaiyeh. Hamas and other militant factions have also continued to indiscriminately fire rockets at areas in southern and central Israel, including a barrage aimed at Jerusalem on 15 December. The delivery of humanitarian aid in the Strip continues to face nearly insurmountable challenges. Amid displacement of an unimaginable scale and active hostilities, the humanitarian response system is on the brink. Limited steps by Israel, including allowing entry of more fuel, food and cooking gas, and opening Kerem Shalom, Karem Abu Salem crossing for the entry of humanitarian supplies, are positive, but fall short of what is needed to address the human catastrophe on the ground. In the northern part of the Strip, that remains mostly inaccessible to humanitarian actors due to insecurity, as well as access restrictions imposed by Israel. Hamas and other militant factions have also continued to indiscriminately fire rockets at areas in southern and central Israel, including a barrage aimed at Jerusalem on 15 December. The delivery of humanitarian aid in the Strip continues to face nearly insurmountable challenges. Amid displacement of an unimaginable scale and active hostilities, the humanitarian response system is on the brink. In the northern part of the Strip, that remains mostly inaccessible to humanitarian actors due to insecurity, as well as access restrictions imposed by Israel. In our focus on Gaza, let us not forget that our attention during the first 9 months of this year was on a West Bank in crisis, with mounting pressures for settlement activity, which I note more than doubled to reach a new annual record since 2017, settler violence, increased Palestinian armed attacks. On 8 December, Israeli forces killed 6 Palestinians, including a 14-year-old child, in a local commander in the Fatah-affiliated Al-Aqsa Martyr Brigades during operations in Al-Fara'a refugee camp, which led to exchanges of fire with armed Palestinians. Over 12 to 14 and 16 to 17 December, 2 large-scale Israeli operations took place in Jenin refugee camp and in Tulkarem, respectively. The operations included exchange of fire with armed Palestinians, Israeli drone strikes, and search operations. In Tulkarem, there were extensive infrastructure damage from IDF bulldozers. 17 Palestinians were killed and dozens were arrested. The Palestinian Authority's fiscal situation continued to be extremely precarious amidst broader economic concerns across the West Bank. Some 150,000 Palestinian workers have been unable to reach their jobs since Israeli imposed strict entry restrictions following the 7 October attacks. Mr. President, I remain concerned about the wider impact of the war in Gaza and the risk for escalation in the region. In the Red Sea, the Houthis in Yemen have targeted numerous vessels by boarding parties, as well as by armed drones and missiles. Strikes have damaged a number of ships and other interdicted by US and other naval forces in the area, raising concerns over the safety of shipping through the vital trade artery. The violence that has taken place since 7 October in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory, particularly in and around Gaza, has shaken the region and most tragically the lives of millions of Palestinians and Israelis. The violence has taken. I strongly condemn the abhorrent armed attacks by Hamas and others in Israel. Nothing can justify the acts of terror that were committed and the deliberate killing, maiming, and abduction of civilians and other protected persons. Accounts of the attacks reveal acts of brutality that are impossible to accept and comprehend. I am appalled by the report of sexual violence during the attacks. These must be vigorously investigated and prosecuted. The indiscriminate firing of rockets towards the Israeli population center, which continue to this day, is a violation of international humanitarian law and must cease completely. The magnitude of hostilities between Israel and Hamas and the scope of death and destruction in Gaza have been unprecedented and unbearable to witness. I unequivocally condemn the killing of civilians in Gaza, including women and children. I mourn the loss of every civilian, including 131 UN colleagues, the single largest loss of life in the history of the organization. I remain gravely concerned by the impact of the ongoing hostilities on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. The current conditions are making it impossible for meaningful humanitarian operations to be conducted. I am alarmed by the lethal attacks carried out by Israeli settlers against Palestinians and by Palestinians against the Israelis in the occupied West Bank and Israel. All perpetrators of violence must be held accountable and swiftly brought to justice. I am appalled by the numerous instances of officials glorifying violence, encouraging the killing of civilians. Such rhetoric is abhorrent and must be clearly rejected by leaders on all sides. Leaders have an obligation to clearly and explicitly condemn acts of terror and violence directed against civilians. I reiterate that Israeli settlements constitute a flagrant violation of UN resolutions and international law, and call on the government of Israel to cease the advancement of all settlement activity immediately. Mr. President, this war has once again served as a devastating and tragic reminder that there is no substitute for a legitimate political process that will resolve the core issues driving the conflict. It is critical that this important junction to enable the parties to re-engage on the long-delayed political path to a two-state solution. I urge Israelis, Palestinians, the states of the region and the broader international community to work together towards this goal. The UN efforts to support this objective has already begun through active consultations in the region. Our work must continue. The UN remains committed to supporting Palestinians and Israelis in ending the occupation and resolving the conflict in line with international law, relevant UN resolutions and bilateral agreements in pursuit of the two-state, Israel, and an independent, democratic, viable and sovereign Palestinian state, of which Gaza is an integral part, living side by side in peace and security with its secure and recognized border, on the basis of the 1967 lines with Jerusalem as the capital of both states. I thank you.